Okay, what's going on everyone? Doc here, and today I want to talk about Nova. So just a general disclaimer before I start. I've received Nova as part of the Content Creator Program. That's a program where Kaban provides me and other content creators a chance to preview Nova before he's actually out. We receive him in our accounts, get a couple days for testing, and then he's removed from our accounts as well. So overall, I really enjoyed Nova. He has a lot of interesting things going for him. First off, he has a really aggressive play style, similar to Ronin, where you dash in and out a ton, and that's how you build up Nova charges really quickly. You can build up his Nova charges and get some pretty good damage if you play him right. You need to keep around 75 Nova charges out of 100. He does have a couple issues, though, because if you don't keep up that 75 charges and you get to 100 by accident, then he loses a lot of stuff. You have to rebuild up his Nova charges after they go on a cooldown. He has a lot of defensive abilities, such as his auto block and his unblockable, which he gets when he hits 100 as well. His damage is all right, especially from his dash attacks. It's pretty impressive. I got him up to like an 8k critical just off of one dash. I think that was with class advantage, but still that's really good for 5-star R3. But if he doesn't have maximum furies, his damage isn't super impressive. Reaching that damage is kind of stressful because you have to watch your Nova charges a ton. And you have to get up all the way to 5 furies to really reach that. So he's interesting. Definitely more of a defender, both from his abilities and from what I've seen testing him. But he can have some alright damage. I'd put him at least above Silver Surfer, but not nearly as powerful as someone like Medusa or Hyperion, who have utility, damage, and immunities as well. He's completely lacking even in immunities. Let's get started. I'm going to go over abilities first, then synergies, and then lots of gameplay. Nova has quite a few different passive abilities. First off, when striking opponents, Nova has a minus 30% offensive power rate, puts him at about the same power gain rate as Havoc and Psylocke, but when dashing forward, Nova passively gains up to 20% of her bar of power based on the distance traveled. More distance, more powered, so he makes up for it that way. His medium attacks do not make contact, so something like Korg's Thorn's damage won't do any damage to him, and they also deal energy damage. He's going to start the fight with a permanent Fury buff, which increases attack, and if it's nullified by the opponent, prevented, or if it is removed through his own abilities, then it's going to go down cooldown for 12 seconds. When Nova is struck with True Strike, Unblockable, or guaranteed critical hits, opponents also have a minus 70% attack rating. World Mind Intervention is Nova's auto block, so when Nova has an active Fury buff and he dashes at the opponent, if the opponent were to hit him while he's dashing, it's going to activate the auto block. So it only auto blocks incoming base attacks. It does not count as a well-timed block, so it won't parry the opponent or reduce the extra damage that a well-timed block would do. And it's going to remove all Fury buffs, and it's going to consume 25 Nova charges. So he has to have a Fury buff for this to activate. So Nova's most important ability is his Nova charges. So it's going to be the icon just to the left there of the Fury, and it has a little bit of a different look depending on the amount of charges you have. So Nova enters the fight at 0 Nova charges and passively generates them over time. He generates them slower the more charges that he has. When dashing forward, Nova generates additional Nova charges, and the farther the distance that he travels during a dash attack, the more charges he generates. If Nova is struck with a True Strike or Unblockable attack, not only does the opponent get that reduced 70% attack rating, but the hit is going to generate 50 Nova charges. When one of Nova's buffs is nullified, you're going to remove 25 charges and prevent him from gaining any charges for 6 seconds. So Nova's Nova Force has a lot of different passive abilities based on the amount of charges that he has. I've kind of covered up Winter Soldier here. Luckily what's happening on him isn't really important. I just really want to focus on this massive block of attacks because it is super important to him. So first off, as another passive ability, his medium attacks deal 30% of damage done as a burst of energy damage. At 25 plus Nova charges, his second medium attack will deal an additional 20% of damage done as a burst of energy damage. And using a second medium will consume 25 Nova charges. This is really important and actually really helpful. I'll talk about that in a second. At 50 Nova charges, auto blocks can be triggered while stunned, and activating it will purify the stun debuff. Because you have to be dashing forward while getting stunned to actually activate this auto block. I haven't quite found out how this activates. I assume it's something like an encroaching stun, where if you were dashing forward, the encroaching stun hits you. If the opponent attacks you, then you're going to purify the stun debuff and actually get the block. When reaching 75 Nova charges, this is the really important one, you're going to gain a Fury buff, increasing your attack by 15% of his base attack. 189 is 15% of a 5-star R3. You're also going to refresh Nova's active Fury buffs, well below his maximum of 4 stacks. So what this means is that you can stack up to 4 of these buffs. If you are at 4 of these 7-second Fury buffs, though, then you're not going to refresh them when reaching 75 again. Best way to get all 4 Fury buffs is to go above and below 75 in a kind of really quick manner, normally by dashing forward to gain charges and using your second medium attack to lose 25 charges. When you reach 100 Nova charges, you're going to gain an unblockable buff for 2.5 seconds. You want to avoid doing this. Reaching 100 Nova charges is not one of the worst things you could do while Nova, but it's really bad because what it's going to do is after 2.5 seconds, when the buff is expired, or if it's nullified or prevented, you're going to consume all 100 of your Nova charges. Even if you don't have 100, you're going to consume all of them. And it's going to prevent Nova charges from being generated for 6 seconds, which means that you can't get back up to 75, which means that you can't build any more Fury buffs. So you're kind of locked out there for 6 seconds. Against tech champions, consuming Nova charges, either by consuming 25 with a second medium or through special attacks, will place an armor break on the opponent. And it can only stack once. It's not going to stack 2 or 3 times. If you use 2 second mediums, then it's just going to refresh that one armor break's duration. Nova's SP1 is going to pause all Fury buffs for 3.5 seconds. You're going to consume 25 Nova charges to gain an Energize buff, which will increase power rate by 30% for 7 seconds. If it's activated at 75 plus Nova charges, you're going to gain a True Strike buff, which allows him to ignore armor resistances, auto blocking, and evade, like all True Strike buffs does. However, so you're only actually consuming 25, even though you need to be at the 75 mark to actually gain that True Strike buff. You see Energize pops at the very end there, and the True Strike pops as soon as the special begins. When activating Nova's SP2, you're going to gain a Nova Surge buff, granting plus 100% additional Nova charge generation for 9 seconds, both through his passive generation and also through dashing. Consume up to 50% Nova charges as well to deal up to 50% of damage done as a burst of energy damage with each hit of the attack. So say if you were at 30 Nova charges, you're going to consume all 30 and deal 30% extra damage done. 50 is just the maximum, and this is probably where most of Nova's damage lies, both just in the raw hits and also because of that extra damage done as a burst. Finally, Nova's SP3, you want to kind of avoid doing this. You want as much as possible as well, because it's going to consume all your Nova charges, and you only deal 0.5% of damage done as an additional burst of energy damage. He really doesn't do that much damage, so dealing, 0.5 times 100 is not going to be that much extra damage. In addition to that, though, you're going to reactivate Nova's permanent Fury buff if it's on cooldown from auto blocking, so it can be helpful in that situation if you really need to reactivate that permanent Fury. Finally, Nova's Sig ability, so it's not really necessary, but it adds some extra damage, and it can also make him more of a pain on defense. So Nova's medium attacks gain up to a 250% of a 5-star R3, that's what that number is, 250% base attack rating, bonus increase, based on the distance traveled in the last executed dash. So the more distance, the more damage. You see a bunch of different numbers pop up against Wolverine X23. I think it gives me up to like a 1,600 extra damage on one of the crits, based on from the lowest to the highest in this clip here, so that can be really good. At 75 Nova charges, his auto block also triggers the parry mastery, but the parry can't interrupt special attacks. His auto block only triggers on basic attack anyways. Finally, the duration of buffs is increased by 80%, which can be nice for his 7-second Fury buff. Nova has 5 unique synergies. Some are more helpful than others. Some I avoid using, and I'd recommend that you do too, unless you get super experienced with Nova and controlling his Nova charges. So, 2 of his synergies on the left there both deal with increasing the amount of Nova charges that he can get. So With Bishop and Havoc, you can gain 1 Nova charge each time Nova generates energy damage. Most of the time you want to avoid taking damage anyway, so taking energy damage, sure, you can gain extra Nova charges. But I don't. But again, if that pushes you over that 100% or that 100 Nova charge threshold, you're going to gain that unstoppable that you want to avoid. You're going to not be able to refresh any more Furies, so maybe you want to avoid using this one. I definitely started to avoid using the Rhino and Iron Fist one, just trying to maintain control of his Nova charges. So this synergy gives him, when he starts a dash attack immediately after dashing back, which you notice I did a ton of the gameplay, he generates an additional 5 Nova charges. So this is a really good way to accidentally put yourself over that 100 threshold and bring yourself back onto having to build all the way back up his charges again. So I ended up avoiding using this one just to make it more simple on myself and controlling his charges, keeping them around that 75 threshold. With Drax and Gamora, increase potency of your Fury buff by 15%. This is the most helpful one. I use this one quite a bit. It's just extra damage. No reason to not have that. With Darkhawk and Night Thrasher, your heavy attacks have a 50% chance to refresh Nova Surge buffs. This gives his heavy attack a use, which is nice. I don't think I've used it in the entirety of the gameplay that I'm going to show, because it doesn't really do anything. It can be nice to refresh your Nova Surge buff. You just get more Nova charges that way, and you can build them. If you get into a good rhythm there, it's fine. But if you lose a Nova Surge buff, it's fine as well, because that way you can dump some extra Nova charges. And that can be helpful just for controlling them as well. Finally, Annihilus gained 40% perfect block chance when triggering auto block. Just some extra damage reduction there. It's a really good chance to perfect block there, reduce all damage. So that can be nice to have, but none of these are all really necessary. I think in my gameplay I mostly used the Drax and Gamora one. I think I used the New Warrior's Blood, but like I said, I never actually used his heavy attack. And Annihilus I couldn't bring into Act 6, so you don't really see any of that as well. So he has them. They're not great, but they are somewhat helpful. They benefit other champions a lot more than they benefit him, though. So in this gameplay, I want to start off with 2 duels to show off Nova's utility. So his utility is relatively limited. He doesn't have any immunities. It mostly is kind of buffed utilities that I can get. So against the Iron Man in Infinity War, he has 2 ways that he can counter him. Specifically that's specifically the auto block aspect of Iron Man Infinity War. He can't do anything about the parrying the projectiles or power control, which is also helpful to fighting him. So mainly using the SP1 when above 75 charges will trigger that True Strike buff, which is good because right here I would have gotten auto blocked once and the auto block didn't trigger because of True Strike. But also if I were to go to 100% charges right there, then I would have been able to activate Unblockable as well, which would have gone through True Strike. So both Unblockable and True Strike are an option, but he's not the best fireman in Infinity War. There's people who can do it better. Korg is another one. People can fight Korg better, but he does do pretty well here. So I already mentioned why he can fight Korg. His medium attacks do energy damage, so he's not going to take that Thorns damage from Korg. Energy damage also does a little bit of extra against Korg because he has a low energy damage threshold. So he can deal some extra damage against Korg. This was doing a really good fight, but I make a mistake in a second here. But yeah, so he's dealing all right, but playing an aggressive dash back in and out style to gain his charges as fast as I could, I messed up, activated the auto block by accident, and lost my base Fury, but SP2 takes him down. So one thing, so as I'm going to move into Act 5, Chapter 4, Quest number 1 here, Vitality Path. I've done this path quite a bit. It's great for 5-star R3s. So one thing you'll notice that I'm doing a ton, dash back in and out all the time. It's very similar to Ronin in that way. Whereas Ronin, I'm switching stances a ton. With him, I want to gain Nova charges. The problem is if I gain too many Nova charges, either through being unable to control them, having to play passive and dashing back in and out, trying to bait special attacks, or just not watching out. If I mess up and I get too many charges, then I go unblockable and I can't build those Fury buffs. So unlike Ronan, I have to watch the clock a ton with Nova. By the clock, I mean his charges. Thought the SP1 would kill there, but it didn't quite get him. So next up against Voodoo, I think here. Yeah, so with classes advantage, we'll see how well this one goes. One thing, I always parry, and then once I get the parry, I dash out and dash back in. It's just a couple extra charges, anywhere from like 8 to 10, I think. Auto block triggers again. It's one of the issues of playing that super aggressive playstyle. It could happen with Ronin as well. I'm going to compare him a lot to Ronin. Their playstyles are really similar. Didn't do a lot of extra damage there, and also Voodoo's regen is helping him out. Voodoo has that extra physical resist though, but the energy damage is kind of cutting right through him. You saw that hit for like almost 4k with and then the extra energy damage on top of it. Nova's damage is alright. Once he gets up to 5 Fury buffs, once you deal that extra energy burst, especially if you do like a long intercept with him, he has some really, really impressive medium damage. Not only because it deals extra energy damage, but also it deals up to like 6, 7, possibly even 8k damage. But the build up there, you want to avoid doing really long dash attacks because sometimes you get over 100 charges. The build up to it is kind of difficult right there. I dashed out twice to get a longer dash, and I got blocked, and I got the auto block to activate, so I lost all of my Fury buffs. This one I make like 3 mistakes. So I activated the auto block. I got to an SP3. I think I make another mistake here. I forget what it is. Oh, I got to 100 charges and activated the unblock. That's what it was. So I made 3 different mistakes there with Wolverine, or against Wolverine. So this turns out to be a much longer fight than it should have been. And it was pretty easy to make all of them. The dash attack was definitely avoidable. Hitting on that unstoppable buff was probably avoidable, but it just shows that if you don't watch out for Nova's charges, then you can let them get away from yourself pretty quickly. So one thing about Ronin, and that's going to be pretty evident in this video, is I have a lot more criticisms than praise for him. I've kind of given a lot of praise as much as I can already. Pretty good damage, especially on the medium attacks. He has a little bit of utility, but overall he's very much built to be a defender. And it's pretty evident not only from trying to fight him in Uncollected Monthly, but also just the way his abilities read. So he gets that auto block when he has a Fury buff, which he has that infinite duration Fury buff. If you have to play passive to bait out a special, he's going to be dashing in and out at you, and he's very likely to activate that unstoppable, or the unblockable on you. Yeah, if you don't have the right champ, if you have someone like Voodoo, he is no problem. I used Voodoo against him on Uncollected Monthly. He was no issue, but it's very clear that he is built to be a defender. But he has some pretty impressive damage if you play him offensively, if you play him perfectly and watch those Nova charges. You have to watch over those Nova charges so carefully. Just before the Iron Man Infinity War clip restarts, I'll hop into the Act 6 gameplay here. So, this one's against Green Goblin with Combo Party and Special Delivery. That's those 12 charges you see there that go down every hit. So I have to use a special attack before those charges go up. Nova actually helps quite a bit on this. So my hit count is kind of low for how much damage I'm dealing. But because of the passive power gain from dashing in and out, I don't need to hit the opponent to get it. I can use an SP3 before I've even done 15 hits. And did quite a bit of damage there, but Green Goblin's regen's kind of healing him up. So I'm up to 4 or 5 Fury buffs there, which is really good. But because I dashed back in and out, I activated the Unstoppable. Really, it's such an easy mistake to make with Nova. I used the SP1 there just to push him to an SP2, because that's easier to dodge than the SP1. But I did take the first hit. So overall, though, not taking too much damage so far. And then the auto block triggered. Luckily, I did keep all my combo party charges, but I lost all my Fury buffs. I think it might be a little bit better if he only lost... It would make him so much of a more painful defender if he only lost one of them, but... Yeah, he's definitely built to be a defender. I think that's why he loses all of them as opposed to losing only one of them. Yeah, I was going to suggest that as a thing, but that would make him so much more painful defender. I lost track of the Special Delivery combo count there, and I took a lot of degen damage from that, but it wasn't... I mean, overall, I hadn't lost much against Green Goblin there. Auto block triggered again, but I didn't really need the Furies to finish him off. So pretty rough fight, but not too bad. And all three of these Act 6 fights are going to be pretty rough, partially due to mistakes of my own. But it shows how easy it is to let the Nova charges get out of hand in the longer a fight. Because in the other ones, I don't think I had reached 100 at any point, because it was really easy to build up to 5 using SP3 and that was it. But here, when I'm building up 5 Fury buffs, when I have to bait out more specials and that kind of stuff, then they tend to get out of hand a lot faster. So right here, I had 4 Fury buffs, which is not bad. Take a lot of blocked hits there, but I know the end of Angelus combo, so I end with combo with a medium. So I've got all 5 Fury buffs here, so I'm going to try and use a SP2, keep myself to just about 75 once those run up. I only got to 40, that's not bad at all. So now I've got to bait out her SP2, and you can see with the Nova Surge buff, I'm getting 2 pretty much every tick, and we got up to 100. I was at, what was I at, like 30 when I tried to bait out that SP2 at the very beginning, and he just gained charges so quickly, just passively. I don't even think I dashed in, I think I just dashed back. But if you have to bait out a special attack, it's really easy to let all of your Nova charges go away like that. And if you lose all your Nova charges, again, you lose all of your utility, because you can't activate that auto block. I shouldn't say all of your utility, because that's like half of that, but that's like half of his utility, right? That True Strike's not an auto block. But you do lose your auto block if you lose your Fury buffs as well. So, same thing. I'm just trying to play aggressive. Same thing happens though. Unblockable triggers. I have not called it unblockable the first time yet. His damage is not too bad though. Second here, I'm going to make another mistake. Only got 1 Fury buff, but I missed an SP2 evade. I've been evading SP2s on her forever. With that Nova Surge buff though, go for second medium. Now I can't parry though, so I've got to play even more passive. I activate the 100% unblockable, but I'm going to kill her with 3 Furies in it anyways. So really rough fight, lots of mistakes, partially on my end getting hit, but you saw Nova charges reach 100 a lot of times in that fight. Now against Spider-Man Stark Enhanced, same thing again in 6.626, so they have similar PI, similar health pools. I came to this fight thinking I would try and activate the True Strike a lot more often, but I found myself needing to dump Nova charges by using the SP2 more often than not. So right here I'm at 90 charges, so I went for the parry to try and get to use a second medium. Right here I'm trying to bait out an SP1. He is having none of it, so I just went in for 2 mediums off of an intercept and got that SP2 off. But here I'm going to have to spend a lot of time waiting out on SP. Again, so waiting out as SP1, I'm getting 2 charges per second because of that Nova Surge buff instead of 1. I haven't dashed in once. I dash in and I get the unblockable. As soon as he uses the SP1, I get the chance. I can't do it. So, since I'm going to lose other charges anyways, I activate the auto block. He hadn't evaded too much. Luckily, I got the evade fail that time. But I tried going back in after a couple hits and got my auto block to trigger, so I lost that Fury buff that I built up. 5k crit in there, not too bad. I've already said his damage is not bad, but that was a 2k, so you can see the kind of difference that it makes. He's evading me a ton. I think I gotta try to go for an SP2. I'm stopping his evade from specials just by being a Cosmic Champion, which is nice. But yeah, you've already seen it's got away from me a couple times. It's gonna get away from me one more time here, but I'm gonna use it to my advantage. If they're on low health, I'll tend to do this. I just tend to kind of, if I get 100% charge, I just go after them and get the kill. Okay, so Nova overall. The best way to describe him is not bad, but not great either. He's a ton of fun if you can control his Nova charges. If you can't control his Nova charges, then he gets out of hand. If you're like me, you kind of start to panic a little bit, and you're more likely to make mistakes after you've lost all the charges. But that's more of a me issue. But as you've seen throughout this thing, it's really easy to make a lot of mistakes with Nova. His damage, when you can reach its maximum, it's quite good. Especially on his dash attacks, and that extra energy damage he can deal both on a second medium and on his SP2 it reaches some really good levels. He is built to be a defender. It's pretty obvious, but luckily he's coming in with a couple counters like Voodoo, Simp Supreme, Black Widow, Clairvoyant that'll have no issue taking him out if you manage to run into him in Alliance War. He's fun to play, kind of like Ronin, but I'd probably pick Ronin over him, even though he probably has a little bit more utility. I showed off Ronin's utility in my video on him. You can only reach up to an 80% ability accuracy reduction, but Rona's damage is a little bit better than this guy, and they really share that similar aggressive playstyle, which is enjoyable. But Nova, you can't always use that aggressive playstyle, because if you do, then you're gonna reach 100 charges, and you want to avoid that if you can on offense until you get all 5 Fury buffs. I guess you could do it then, but then you're unblockable. You don't need to be super aggressive like that dash in and dash out style. So that's gonna do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you in the next one.